So I'm going to do a brief rundown on tips on how to use a scientific calculator. I'm just going to go through like a few things that people kind of make mistakes on and kind of how to avoid that. So first thing I'm going to talk about is that order of operations that very much applies in this case, and you want to, parentheses are going to pretty much be your best friend. So if you put in something like, you're trying to put that into a calculator, you want to make sure you have this in parentheses. So when you put that in the calculator, it will be, and then that should give you whatever the answer is. You want to put the, if you don't put the parentheses in, then it will treat it as something like this instead. It will do the first thing that comes to mind. So if you put, you're gonna get 10. Why? Because it basically is saying it's this, which is different because the 20 was times by this, but now you're timesing it by this whole thing. Because basically it's just going from left to right, so it's doing the 20 divided by the 40 first. But if you put in the parentheses, it does the grouping first, and then it does the dividing. So that's, yeah, the first thing that people mess up on when it comes to these calculators. When you have like a power, like if you have, it's gonna be different than without the parentheses. So if you do -2, and if you want, usually you can do this button for squared, that will give you +4 because it's timesing -2 times -2. If you don't do the parentheses, however, that's going to do the squared first and then put the negative. And if you have like a really complicated exponent, so if we had like say, so if we want to do something like that, we would do this arrow, which just means it's going up to that exponent. And in this case, since we have a pretty complicated one, we want to use parentheses. So in this, yeah. And we know that it's going to go from left to right, so we shouldn't have to worry about that. Unless we wanted to make more specific. But yeah, that's just would depend on your problem. So we have that. So this is now correct. And it should give us like, yeah, like a really complicated number. And since, yeah, like it has the times 10 to the 25th, that just means that it goes all on for like 25 more digits. So if we have something, if we want to do something like that, first thing we want to do, we gotta clear that. We want to do second, and then that, and this will automatically mean square root. And so now you put this, the 4 times 5 squared, into that parentheses. So you like the 4 times 5, and in this case we can just do the squared. So close the parentheses, and then yeah, that should do the square root of that entire thing. If we wanted to have that to the cube root, we want to do 3 and then shift in that arrow, and so then it gives us this weird x root. And so what that just means is that the number before it is going to be whatever that root is. So in this case, the 3 will go in that x. So now, and then we put our, so we do that, and then it gives us, yeah, like the cube root. So that's pretty much how you get that all figured out. Also, when it comes to negative, you want to make sure you're using this right here, this button, because that is a negative. Because if you're trying to put -2, and if you do something like, but it's not going to work because it doesn't register it as a negative. And that also applies the other way. So you can't just do 3 -2, because it's not gonna, if you're trying to say like 3 minus 2, then you have to use this, not the negative, because then yeah, you're just gonna get another syntax error. So yeah, that's important that you have to know when to use the negative and when to use the minus. And so another thing that people should probably know how to use is answer. So if you put like an operation and it's like, okay, well, I want to use that answer for later if I want to use it for a calculation. What if I want to find that answer squared? Well, instead of like putting that entire thing in parentheses and then squaring it, what you can do is you can go to the last thing you calculated and like put that in a new calculation. So to get to the answer button, you want to press the second, and the second helps you. The second just means that you're using, you see like this blue print above the buttons. In order to use those functions, you have to use second. So if I use like second and then the squared, it's going to use that square root right there. So yeah, so in this case you have to do the second and then answer, and then that'll be the last thing you calculated. So in that case it'll be the whole 38.889. So if I want to do like, okay, well, I want to square that answer, well, then you can just second answer, and yeah, the answer is just the right above the negative sign, and then you square it, and then that gives you your answer. And if you have like complicated exponents, yeah, you just do just the same as the others. And yeah, let me just give a really crazy number. So if we want to put that in scientific notation, we want to press second and then DRG. And right now I think it's just on regular mode, and if we want to put it into scientific notation, you just go to SCI, and then it'll say, yeah, like 4.95 to the, yeah, and if you round that, could be something.
And
then if you want to switch back, because it's going to apply that to all the numbers. Oh, there you go. You just do that, and bam, and there you go. So if you want to do some other things, like say if you have 0.8, well, how could you convert that to a decimal? Because yeah, I mean, in this case it's going to be, but if you had, how would you put that in a fraction? Because you can sometimes display your answers as fractions. So in order to do that, you want to press this button right here, but you want to press the second first, or the shift, and then right where PRB is, because right above that is that F, and then those arrows, the D, that just means it switches from fraction to decimal. So when you press that, it just means it switches from one form to another. So then in this case, because it automatically would go to decimal, but in this case it's switching to fraction, so it would say 4/5. And so if you were to do that, if you were to press that again, like if you had your answer, because your answer will be displayed in fractions now. If you want to go back to decimal, you just do the same thing. And there you go. And so, and if you have like a really complicated exponent,